of 1815, a group of fur trappers was making their way along the Big Creek River in what is now Washington State, near the Big Creek Falls area, when they came across an abandoned camp. It was obvious to them that the camp belonged to another group of trappers, but it appeared to have been empty for some time. They searched the camp and found a journal hidden under a rock that was under a beaver pelt. The man who found it kept it and passed it down through his family. Written in it were the disturbing events that took place to the group in May and June of 1812, spanning a month or more. The journal belonged to a man by the name of John Patrick Henry of the Pacific Fur Company. This is his story, transcribed to modern-day English. I believe the day is June 2nd, but I'm not certain. What's happened to us over the last few weeks and continues to happen is something none of us could have ever comprehended. We're all confused and frightened. None of us know what to do anymore. We're all so tired. There were 9 of us. We're now down to 7. I fear we will continue dwindling. When we began this journey, I was quite acquainted with 3 of the men, having trapped with them before, but the others were strangers. We came to the spot we're at now several weeks ago and began trapping the area. 4 days after arriving, we trapped it out, so we decided to move downstream. The following day, the day it started, that morning was like all others before. We awoke, cooked breakfast, had some coffee, packed our gear for the journey downstream, and then left. It was slow going as we walked along the river, as we had more weight now from the fresh beaver pelts. We didn't have a plan as to how far we'd go, just until we found more impoundments. We'd been going for some time, and it was mid-afternoon when we came to a set of thick pine trees that looked like a wall stretching out as far as we could see. I was in the rear but could hear one of the men angrily blurt out, "What in the bloody hell is going on?" I was exhausted and breathing hard, so it took me a minute to fully understand why he was angry. There on the ground in front of us were the remnants of a recently built fire. I started looking around, and everything seemed familiar. Then it hit me. We're back at the camp we left this morning. This can't be, I thought. This is a damn camp we left this morning, said Ephraim, who's the leader of our group. Hogwash, it's not possible, responded Samuel. Take a closer look, you coot. You see the carving on the tree over there? Carson put it there yesterday, replied Ephraim. My ears started ringing as the men began to argue about what happened and how we could have possibly ended up back at our previous camp when we were obviously following the river downstream. This makes absolutely no sense, I thought to myself. We set our gear and pelts down as we were all exhausted. I then went and sat down against a tree, slightly away from everyone, as I watched them continue to argue about what was happening. As I sat there, I pondered the possibilities and thought maybe we did just go in a circle or somehow got turned around and went back the way we came. Whatever it was, we really had no choice but to spend another night there and leave again in the morning. When morning came, like before, we ate, gathered our things, and then left. This time, though, Ephraim took the lead as the rest of us followed. As we walked along, I remembered specific landmarks to my right from the previous day, which to me meant we didn't get turned around. No one said anything about it, though, not wanting to argue, but I suspect some of them knew it as well. This time, I was paying closer attention to my surroundings. When the wall of thick pine trees came into view, I almost shouted out, "We should walk around them," but everyone was tired, so I kept my mouth shut. I was in the rear again, as I'm the slowest, and was lagging further behind. This time, before I even reached the trees, I heard Ephraim yelling something, but I couldn't make out exactly what he was saying, so I picked up the pace. As I stepped into the clearing, I couldn't believe my own eyes. We were right back at the camp again. Ephraim threw his musket down and started going hysterical. He picked up some dead branches, breaking them against trees as he shouted, "Cursed things!" The rest of us stood there silent and dumbfounded, thinking this was impossible. "What sort of witchcraft is this?" I mumbled quietly to myself. "The devil is at play here," said Duncan. "You don't know that," said Carson. "Something is definitely amiss here, though," he responded. "What else could it be?" asked Duncan. "It's not the devil, damn it. We're cursed," said Ephraim angrily. It took a spell for Ephraim to calm down so we could discuss what we should do next. After a long, heated discussion, we made the decision to go back upstream the following day and find a different tributary to trap. Everyone was mostly quiet in camp that night. I remember staring at the fire and having dark thoughts about what was actually going on. I was startled awake the next morning as I heard, "Hey, Carson and Duncan are gone," shouted Alton. "What in the blazes are you going on about?" yelled Ephraim as he rolled over and sat up. "They're gone, but their gear is still here," replied Alton. I jumped up to look and could see Duncan's moccasins and Carson's boots next to their bedrolls. "No man could walk through these mountains without their boots," I said aloud. I was now panic-stricken, though I did my best to hide it from the other men. Something very wrong was happening, and I wanted to leave the area. "Get up, men! We're leaving now!" yelled Ephraim as he stood up. As he gazed down at their bedrolls, he said, "I don't know what happened to Duncan and Carson, but we're not sticking around here. I'm guessing they left on their own accord." We quickly gathered our things and left without having breakfast. We wanted to put some distance between us and that camp. As we walked upstream, we talked and laughed, trying to make light of the situation. I was starting to feel a sense of relief, but couldn't stop thinking about Carson and Duncan. No one would go through the mountains without their gear, especially their boots. Maybe they lost their minds, I told myself. It was mid-afternoon when we came around a small hill, and what I saw made me nearly drop my musket. There, in front of us, was the wall of pine trees. "Bloody hell, this can't be," grumbled Ephraim. Like before, I was about to say we should go around when he said, "We'll try going around the damn thing this time." Even after he said that, I still felt like something was wrong. We'd been going in the opposite direction but still came to the wall of pines. We turned and started heading west, going for quite a ways, but the wall of trees was still there. After a while, we came to the bottom of a hill and stopped to take a rest before climbing it. No one said anything as we rested. I suspect everyone was deep in thought, wondering if this nightmare was ever going to end. When we made it to the top, my heart sank and a sense of dread filled me as we looked down into the small valley. The nightmare seemed like it would never end. The wall of pines was there in front of us and seemed to go on forever, as far as we could see. My mind then went to another place to try and cope with what was going on as the men started arguing again. Whether it was the devil himself or some sort of witchcraft, it made no difference. Whatever it was actually happening. We were stuck in a perpetual nightmare. We were away from the river and needed water, so we decided to go back to where we turned west and go through the wall of pines. It was almost dark when we made it back. Before going through, we looked at each other, and I could see Ephraim look frightened, which was unlike him to show any emotion other than anger. I imagine he was blaming himself for being in charge. "Let's get this over with," he said, as he proceeded to walk through. As we followed, like before, after passing through the trees, we were back at camp. Something came to mind as I passed through and into the clearing. What if I go back? So I turned and walked back, but ended up at the same place I just left. At that point, everyone was mentally and physically exhausted. We dropped our gear, made a fire, ate dinner, then went to bed. The next day, instead of trying to leave the area, we put our efforts toward finding deer and elk to eat, as we were running out of meat. We had long talks about what to do, but no one could agree on how we could get out of this or what to do. We decided to hunker down and focus on nothing but survival. I think it's the 7th of June. I'm not keeping track of time much anymore, and I haven't written in here for several days. Yesterday, something unfathomable happened to 4 of the men. Ephraim and 3 others decided to see if they could find a way out while the rest of us remained. It was midday, and I was sitting by the campfire by myself, while Alton and Olin were off fetching wood, not too far from camp, when I saw something out of the corner of my eye staggering towards me from the trees. I immediately stood up, grabbed my musket, and took aim. "Ephraim, is that you?" I said as I lowered my musket. I could barely recognize his face, as it was disfigured and bloody. It was then I noticed both of his hands had been cut off, and his entrails were hanging down below his belt. He then walked up to the fire and collapsed next to it. I quickly knelt down and rolled him over, asking what had happened. He was trying to say something but could barely breathe, and blood was flowing out of his mouth. As he took his last breath, I yelled out to Olin and Alton to come quick. A few minutes later, they came running back. "This can't be happening," said Alton as his voice trembled. "It indeed is happening, I'm afraid," responded Olin. "We need to go find the others," I said, my voice trembling with fear. "All right, but we stick together," replied Olin. We grabbed our muskets and took off, going in the direction Ephraim had come back to camp. We formed a skirmish line with our weapons at the ready as we crept along through the forest. We had no idea what to expect, but I kept thinking we were somehow next. We walked along the river for a while before I caught sight of what looked like a piece of clothing on the ground in some bushes. I whistled and pointed, letting them know I saw something up ahead. As we got close enough, I could see it was Samuel's blue shirt. It was quite torn, but there was no blood on it, which I thought was strange. "Gent, look at that. What is that?" asked Alton as he pointed to the tree the shirt was next to. There was something carved on it, something I'd never before in my life seen. It was a circle with some letters around it that read BL with strange symbols inside it. "Whatever it is that's out there, I hope it doesn't find us," said Olin in a distressed tone. "Hey, you guys, look over there!" shouted Alton as he took off running. We quickly followed him and didn't go far before he stopped in his tracks and was staring at something on the ground next to a large tree. There on the ground was a naked, bloody body of Emil, one of the 4 men who'd gone to find a way out. His body had the same horrific injuries as Ephraim's. On the tree were the same letters and symbols, the only difference being that he had the letters AL written in blood on his chest. Olin crossed himself and began to pray. "There's something wicked at play here," he said. After he finished, I whispered, "We need to bury them." I didn't care anymore and had accepted the fact I was also going to die. "Let's go back to camp. We'll bury him tomorrow. Today, we bury Ephraim," said Alton as he turned and began heading towards camp. When we made it back to camp, we buried Ephraim next to the river, where the ground was soft and easy to dig. The following day, we buried Emil next to him. Over the next several days, I couldn't get the letters AL on Emil's chest out of my head. What did they mean? Did whoever killed him write them, or did Emil write them before his hands were cut off? Last night, something strange happened. I was sleeping when I suddenly woke up to Alton standing above me, staring down at me. I asked him what was wrong, but he only gave me a menacing smile and then went and lay back down. Today, as I was sitting by the fire cooking lunch while Olin and Alton were out getting meat, it hit me. I now know what the letters AL stand for. I know my time on this earth is coming to a close. We've tried several more times to get past the wall of pines, and to no avail. I'm going to hide this book and pray someone finds it so our deaths will not be forgotten. A stands for Alton. I have reason to believe he is a demon of sorts. That was the final sentence in John's journal. The journal also had a crude drawing of the symbol they found on the trees. Aside from the journal, the men found the graves of Ephraim and Emil, as well as the 2 trees that had the symbols and letters on them. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.